get into education. In the last forum, they talked about how you need to get into education, get kids interested in amateur radio, get kids interested in science. I think one of the better ways to do that would to get specifically women interested in amateur radio, because a lot of teachers are women. So if you focus more on peoples in technology and education, you're going to get the kids interested, and as they grow older, they're going to be like, remember that cool lab I did when I was a little kid? That was so awesome. Now I want to do amateur radio. And then they'll grow up, and they'll be an amateur radio operator, and they'll be an aerospace engineer, and they'll be the next Einstein. Like.
So how do we get them to get that interest in college, or keep them interested when they get to college? Because I agree, those are all excellent points. But what actions could we do? Yeah, that's. Yeah.
At Ohio State, they have an electronics club. I'm the faculty advisor at Ohio State. They have an electronics club that had 50 or 60 members. And we were devoid of enough members to elect officers in the amateur radio club. So we linked up with the electronics club and got some of the electronics people who were mostly interested in computer circuitry and digital kinds of things, sort of said, come on over to RF. And we've actually pulled a few people from the electronics club into the amateur radio club. We're not at 20 yet, but we're above 0.
So when you say that you sort of pulled them over, what was the hook that you got to get them to come into the radio world?
There are an awful lot of engineering jobs in RF-related companies, and you're not learning anything about radio frequency stuff, messing around with digital circuits and computer programming, basically. They really latched onto this, gee, their internships or their job prospects in RF.
So it's good that you brought that. We're going to segue into that.
Okay.
Yeah, because jobs are definitely a part of it. Anyone else? Yeah.
I'll talk really quick. Bouncing off of that, we've done some recruitment with IEEE, the student branch. Made some announcements about teaching a ham class at IEEE. And this semester we had over 20 students in our ham technician class, and that helped grow our club a lot. Not everyone who takes a technician license is going to be an active member of a club, but it definitely helps to get more licenses out there and to get people's feet wet with amateur radio.
So I think we can get people potentially to join a club initially. Everyone's gone to those sort of club fairs. But how do we keep them? Recruitment's sort of a two-part process, right? You got the hook to get them in, but then once you got them, how do you keep them? Are there activities that work really well or not so well?
How about the quality of the radio station?
That's a great point. So facilities. How many clubs in here, just curious?
Communication, and we also fox on campus, and running around with the antennas draws a lot of attention.
So plugging the fox hunt, because I've told this to everyone I've talked to today, Mini Circuits is here and they have attenuators. They're cheap. So if you want to have a fox hunt for your club, go pick up some attenuators over there, and that'd be great. They're like fox hunts. We do those a lot at Florida. We actually have a faculty member whose name is David Fox, and then 4DF, and we call it the David Fox Hunt. And he just goes and hides on campus at NCW for like a couple of hours, because buildings cause it to go all over the place. So it's a little more of a challenge. What about the makeup of clubs? So you originally brought up a point about getting women into this, and I think that's one of the great atrocities of this hobby is that we don't have a lot of women in amateur radio. And we don't have a lot of women in college clubs, which there's absolutely no reason for. They're perfectly capable, it's a fun activity, everyone would enjoy it. Is there any clubs that are out there trying to encourage women to get active or have had women as in leadership roles in their clubs?
I actually founded our club, and I actually had to, it was more of an uphill struggle. Like there were a bunch of, I guess, it was more the college saying, oh no, this is never going to fly. We're now, 2 years now? Yeah, 2 years into it and not looking back.
What school?
Star State College, North Canton, Ohio.
Excellent. Any other clubs?
I wanted to just jump in because David's not here. David Kasdan from Case Western Reserve. He said that their club is largely women, and I think all the officers are women. And it's a very big and active club right now.
We've had several that have had officer positions. We've had some this last year, but it's not a majority.
So that's a real problem. At UF, we actually had a young lady that took one of our licensing classes. She did, her tech in general and tested for extra as well, not in one session, but worked her way up. And she was president of Gator Amateur Radio. And we actually did a lot of really cool stuff that I never thought of. And I think that there's a lot of ideas that can be shared just because it's a different way of looking at things. We were out on campus tabling and doing that sort of stuff, and she had flyers constantly for different events. So I think that there is a lot of value to having that diversity in our clubs. I think it's something we should strive for, because I think if we have a good mix of both men and women in an amateur radio club, everyone feels more comfortable. It reflects more of society, and there's a lot of ideas that can be exchanged through
That
that.
might parallel the women in engineering schools.
Yeah, and that's
I mean,
another problem.
in Missouri, there's a strong women in engineering organization. We don't have an amateur radio.
Right.
That's very good.
So that might be something where you could look at partnering maybe with the Society of Women Engineers to promote that, and trying to get more women into amateur. Even, there's a lot of opportunities there, partnering with the Girl Scouts to try and get young women interested before they get to college. So some things that can really, really help drive recruitment. Cool, that's a good discussion. Yeah.
Are you working on intercollegiate contests?
So there's a couple right now, but I think we'll get to some of those discussions in a little bit. So once we have these clubs that exist on paper, or the call sign, that's great. Money is sort of what's needed to, buy radios, do tower work, all that sort of stuff. Where does funding come from? Are we student government funded for the most part, or are we largely going off and doing our own thing? Anyone?
Generally, student government, at least in our case.
Okay.
So there's departmental funding at KU. There has been student senate funding in the past, and a lot of alumni funding.
Yeah, so alumni funding is big at UF. We actually have our own nonprofit, Alumni and Friends of Gator Amateur Radio, and that's how we get our funding.
Ohio State has a program called Campus Campaign for faculty, staff, students, friends of the university to contribute. It's a tax-deductible charitable contribution. So I set up a fund for the Amateur Radio Club, and we get trickled, but we get funding regularly that way. Enough to make it $1,000 or $2,000 a year.
Okay. Acta, you were going to say something?
Yeah, it's just, I think it's student budget board, it's, well, most of us fun, we kind of think, I don't remember if this is successful, but we tried to play the contest aspect of it a little as well, as sort of to look for funding in that area as well, from that pot of money, when my treasurer would know more about that, but, and it's also a lot of, and also dues, pretty much that's supposed to be funding.
Yeah, Dave, you had your hand up?
Yes, I didn't say where I was from, but Texas A&M University. We've had a station there forever, and we don't get any money from the student government or student service fees at all. But we do get our building. We have our own building. We get our own utilities there, the air conditioning, electricity, and all that. So when you add that up, that's a lot more than what we got through the student services anyways. The rest of it we get from we have a large club, so we have dues, students pay dues, and then we have alumni support.
Sam, you were going to add on?
So in some crazy cases, I mean, we do have student government funding, but in the event of our station move about 5 years ago, by convincing the administration that we were an important asset to the college, I don't know what the numbers were, but they provided facilities and services support. They came up with a budget for a new tower. They hired professional engineers to site it properly. So certainly, if you convince the university that you're an asset to their university, then special off one-time funding for things like this can occur in some cases.
So it's funny you say that, bringing up what Tony brought up about David. His job now, he's like a doctor, he's both a medical doctor and a PhD in electrical engineering, but his focus is on amateur radio, and they've got like the development office rallying behind it. And it's like a thing at Case Western now where there's like an academic purpose for it being there. So I think that that's a really great way. Yeah.
One of the dreams that I had when I was actually at KU was to operate satellite from KU with a big satellite station. And we were never able to make that happen while I was there. Then the aerospace and the electrical engineering program was working very closely with NASA, and they actually launched a mini-sat. So there was actually a push from them to get equipment that they could use to track that satellite with. So they bought all the equipment for that program and installed it at the club station because we were the logical place to put it. And then, unfortunately for them, the satellite blew up on launch, and fortunately for us, we got to keep all of it and play with it. So you got to think out of the box sometimes and make as many networking contacts as you can. And that's where it's so important to have a faculty advisor that's involved with the club, not just there to hold the trustee of the license. And I'm stealing your thunder there, Ron, because that's I think the most valuable thing, because there are lots of opportunities that you will never hear about if your faculty advisor is not thinking of you on a weekly basis.
I tell you, one thing when you hit on it right there in networking, you know, like my club, not the collegiate club, but the regular club in the town, loved to support what they were doing. And the more you guys go and try to network with your local area clubs that are going on, the more you're going to find out of the woodwork comes equipment. Okay, some, you know, you might find a niche or you might find none, but they may, you know, that may be a lot, because I know we ended up helping out one of the high schools substantially. But you know, college is still right there. We just had one of the Rose president come do a presentation, and then I'm going to try to see if I can get some money for it. But yeah, it's really got to touch base, because I think there's a lot of clubs out there wanting to help and would love to get enthusiastic as you guys are, because you come in and it's just like the new baptized people. You know, they come in and they get everybody else fired up, okay? And there's a, you know, if you look at the demography of all our clubs, where are they at? 40 plus whatever, okay? So you guys got to knock on the door, do a presentation, what you're doing, and get them excited.
And the other thing I would say to that is don't give up at the first club.
Yeah.
Because there are some clubs that are very receptive, there are other clubs not so receptive, but don't let them turn you off, because there are those people out there, and don't stop just because the first guy says no.
Yeah,
So,
Not
segueing
not
that,
everybody's got a door open.
That's right.
once you have funding, and it sounds like there's a lot of good ideas on how to get it, and I think reaching out to local clubs, reaching out to alumni and all that's great, you have to do things with that money, and that usually means buying stuff and putting up towers. Just curious, how many universities in the room are all gung-ho about you guys climbing towers? Wow, so many hands went up. Absolutely none. None. So that's a problem, right? How many universities require you to go out and get contractors to do it and have insurance and all that? Yeah.
Or at least have some procedures that we have to go
Right.
through and do.
Yeah.
Real fast.
So
We of course have the limitation on climbing the towers and everything, but they didn't want to go get the professionals outside, so we had to build a tower that retracts and tilts over.
So how do you work within that? So you had to make a tilt tower. Anyone else? Are there interesting limitations that you have to work within, and how do you deal with those?
Well, I mean, when we put our tower back up, because Clarkson is a small college, that's where I'm from, and as they're slowly getting larger and they're developing their risk management department. And what that meant is the old strategy of real quick, real quiet, and somebody in the bottom floor of Moore House is going to have an HT and watch for Campo to go by. So the compromise we arrived at was, I don't know if it was the best one, but we have an Alumni telescoping tower on the roof that actually can be lowered to 12 feet. And at that point, you put up a 12-foot ladder, strap yourself on, and somebody can permissibly go up and install the antennas.
So radios are expensive, right? How many universities will let you just go out and buy a radio without any sort of procedure? So you usually get an asset tag on, right? No hands went up there. So we pretty much always get. Our hobby though ebbs and flows, right? So let's say you went out and you got a Flex 5000 and now the Flex 6600's out and you want one of those, but you have an asset tag on your Flex 5000. How do you get rid of that? Has anyone thought of ways to work around that within their universities, or do we just get this amassing pile of old radios and we keep asking people for more and more money?
That's the museum wall. That's
Yeah, I mean, yeah, the big problem is if it gets an asset tag, well, even if it, so an undergrad at Rose-Hulman, we had their new policy was, I think, not to asset tag things unless they were over like $10,000. They raised the limit. But still, if you sell that stuff, technically the money's supposed to go back to student government.
Yeah.
So we didn't touch that stuff. So yeah.
So one way that we got around this limitation at the University of Florida is having that nonprofit is really, really handy because they can do permanent loans or definite loans to the university with an MOU or even, sometimes even more informal than that. And then that way, when it comes time to return the hardware, or you want to sell the hardware or whatever, it's a very easy transaction since that nonprofit holds the assets and holds the money. When they sell it, it stays within our pot of money because if you, like you said, if you sell a student government thing or university tag, they get that money. You will likely never see it again. But so that's something to think about. And setting up a nonprofit takes a year or so. It's definitely involved. You have to have a board, and alumni are great for that. Maybe you have an alumni who's an attorney. May or may not have that at UF, which really helped out. So those are some things to think about. Yeah, Sam.
In some cases, I don't know how widespread this is, but in Clarkson, if the club agreed they wanted to sell an asset tag piece of equipment, they could do that, and the money would go back into the account for that club. So we've used that to upgrade several pieces of equipment at the station.
So it definitely varies then by university as well. So some things to think about. So the last one here on this slide, don't worry, there's plenty more slides to go, and we got some time, is alumni and professional networks. So this one I'm going to brag about my brother on because he's really sort of seen how this one paid off in terms of his professional network, and he actually got some jobs about that. So Tony, you want to share about that?
Yeah, so as soon as I've been involved with electronics through middle school and high school a bit, but got licensed as a ham senior year of high school, pretty soon, towards the end of that year, actually, before college. But anyways, right away when I was looking for internships, I put ham radio on my resume. And in every single interview I've had for an internship or even a full-time job, it's come up. And they've asked about it. And it's been a major point. And for me, it's been great that not only am I able to show something I enjoy, but it shows to them. It shows initiative. I kind of can almost run that part of the interview. It kind of gives me an advantage in that sense. I have an upper hand. They're not asking me questions. I'm telling them. So it's been great for me that it's come up. It actually led me to a job at Motorola working on their DMR repeaters for a summer. So and there were a bunch of hams there, of course. So that was a great experience. So I always tell people if you're licensed and active, make sure you put on your resume, write about in your cover letters, your applicable experience because it's definitely important.
So just curious, of these student hams or recent college grad hams in the room, how many of us have our call signs on our resume? So most, not all. So if you don't have it on your resume, and even if you're not a student and you're updating your resume, put it on there. I know it helped you out. I know Sterling, who many of you probably know from Missouri, he got his job at Boeing because of his amateur radio license. I actually was interviewing at Microsoft even, a company that doesn't do radio or RF at all, and it came up in one of my interviews. The guy that was interviewing me was a ham. So it's definitely one of those things that builds that network. So I would encourage that. Has anyone actually thought about networking with the alumni of their university based on amateur radio? Like, have you actually talked to them online or on the air? So
Yeah, we're from Michigan State University and the radio club W8SH, and we have very generous alumni. We have had donated a Flex 3000 by an alumnus whose son just started Michigan State University. He's been very active in ham radio and fitting in with the point that was made before. The day he donated the Flex 3000 was almost the last day that we saw him.
does anyone use amateur radio to reach out to their alumni and keep in contact with them? Or has anyone worked their alumni? Yeah.
Absolutely.
A few, yeah.
So our slogan for our UF station is we are connecting the global Gator Nation. Because I have talked to lots of UF alumni. I mean, there's hundreds of thousands of UF alumni at the big school, but I have talked to them on the air, through that, and it's a great way to keep that connection. And I've met people and heard some ridiculous stories of what the university used to be like, just through that, things that, it makes that really, really cool connection. And they come back at homecoming, and we've had that where they want to come by and, check out the station. So I would encourage students to use the alumni not just as a source of revenue, which is great, but also to connect them and sort of keep them tied in with what you're doing, because you also never know when those alumni become your professional network.
Well, and a lot of your alumni, like me, live in homeowner associations, and the only opportunity you might have to work a big contest level station, if that's what you have, some of you do. We have a 7L beam at 150 feet and a big amp, and it's the only place I get to play HF. And that's a huge draw for other alumni as well, and that's a good way, again, to say, hey, you like this stuff, continue to support it so it will continue to thrive. Selling tickets to the contest, basically, at that point. And alumni have supported that immensely at KU.
So one question I have for all the students in the room, how many of us just walked in, passed our license all the way through extra on the first day and had this unbelievable knowledge of amateur radio downloaded into our minds? Everyone, right? So we all learned it from someone, right? We have an Elmer somewhere, that's helped us a lot. The alumni that come and do exactly what you're doing, come and be active in our clubs, are a great way to learn that knowledge. I had never climbed a tower, and officially I never have, until I talked to some of the alumni in the club, and I learned a lot about safety and all that goes into that. And that's something I never would have even thought about. I just would have thought, I need to go get the beat down, or what gin pole was, and that's a great way because we have a lot of alumni that are active that, said, oh, this is how we do it. So,
6 a.m. on Sunday. That's
yeah. So
Real quick, real quiet.
Yeah, that's right.
So I did see that Tom Gallagher walked in, and I do want to give him a few minutes to talk about what the league is doing before we move into our next slides, because we sort of jumped over his slide. So Tom Gallagher, NY2RF from the American Radio Relay League.
Thank you, brother.
Appreciate it.
Sorry I'm late. Came from a member forum. You did all this. You did all this. It's so impressive. Maybe you don't realize that this whole thing began with just an idea in October of last year at the Boxborough, when we said, can we get some of the schools in New England to be interested in revitalizing amateur radio? And a bunch of people showed up. Well, they filled 2 forums to capacity. And of course, we heard the Harvard Radio Club and the Yale Radio Club comparing notes, and they have the same problems. Administrative foreclosure, loss of space, you can't get on the towers. I won't go down the list, but you share a lot of the same issues. So we decided to create a Facebook group, and that Facebook group grew from 50 to 500 in the space of about 6 months. I think it represents 250 or so separate colleges and universities ranging across the spectrum. I think the third to pile on was the U.S. Military Academy at West Point, who asked the question, where's the Navy? We still haven't heard from the Navy. If any of you are in touch with the Navy, tell them we want to hear from them. And then Ed Snyder and the Snyder Family Foundation gave us a generous gift to continue the process and to promote college amateur radio. And we made the commitment inside of ARRL to go out to every major Hamfest we can to cover this topic. And we ran into your 2 hosts this afternoon down in Florida at Hamvention, and immediately drafted them to do this, and we're very grateful that they have. We hope that they'll have some other things to do, although you have a job to go to, and I understand that. You have a day job now. But I encourage all of you to find your replacement if you're graduating. Find them right now, or her right now, and slot them in so we can continue it on. Where this thing goes, the possibilities are endless. I 100% concur with the recommendation, put your call sign and your amateur radio interest on your resume. No matter what stage of life you are, you may run into somebody who has one too, and it's immediately a point in your favor, or a source of irritating questions, right? One or the other. But for all of you who support this initiative, the League is deeply grateful, and we look forward to having all of you bridge that space between high school and early life interest on the one hand, and postgraduate professional interest on the other. It's very easy to lose touch with amateur radio when you go away to college, because there's so many other things to distract you, like grades and corporate recruiting, persons of the opposite gender, and beverages. So maintain that follow through. And on behalf of everybody in Newington and everybody who's worked on the initiative, I am undyingly grateful. Thank you very much.
Quick question on that. Do we know how many amateur radio stations are in colleges?
Do we have the exact number? So that's actually, there's a Google Doc that is shared on the Facebook group where we're trying to build that. I know Sterling did a search and found I think it was around 250 or so, 300, just from the FCC's license search. And then there were some of them that were added in because he did just search for college or university in the name. But Gator Amateur Radio Club, for example, wasn't on the list because it doesn't have
I was thinking ARL would be replaced.
But I would assume the league has the same access to the data that any other ham would in terms of pulling it from the FCC database. So I would.
It's just a storage for us.
Yeah.
I like your Google.com. Just keep adding to it.
So no, I mean, we think that there's about 350 or so is the current best guess based on registered and people who have chimed in saying, yeah, there's one here too. So. Cool. I do want to jump over to a new slide here. So technology has changed, and this is something that's come up a lot. It's been discussed a bit in the Facebook group since, Hamvention, but it's something that's been discussed a lot more recently is we got to keep amateur radio current. How many people in the room have a smartphone? It's pretty much everyone, which means we can share video, we can take pictures, we can be on social media, we can do all sorts of stuff all the time. How are your clubs taking advantage of that? How many clubs have a website? That's most of us, not everyone. Say, let's start with a static website. HTML is a great skill to have, or you can use an online editor. But then it's getting something interactive, right? So I know there's clubs out there with social media. Any clubs want to share their social media thoughts?
So for the Rose Holman Club, I basically made a Facebook group, basically as a way to keep in touch with all the alumni, was my goal. If we get everybody, added while they're in the club, we have a Facebook group, and then I added a few other alumni I knew, and then if everyone joins as they go on, they'll still be in that group. We tried to post photos there. If we were doing operating events, tell people about it. And actually, it was pretty good. Then a few other alumni invited a few other, and it kind of grew that way. So that's good in the regard that I don't think people are likely to leave the group. So it'll always be there in Facebook as they're checking back, and it should pop up from time to time for them. And you can also put files and stuff there too, and use it in that way.
What about Twitter, Missouri?
Yeah, we run a Twitter page. Every time we're doing some event, not every time, but a lot of the time, I'll take a picture, put it up there. Sometimes it'll get retweeted by the university, which is cool. It gets us some publicity. Also run a Facebook page. Another discussion maybe about the social media. I know a lot of schools now for clubs are requiring them to use something like WorkSync, which is which will generate a website for them. Sometimes it can be limiting, but it does give a way to find something searchable on Google for your club. And keeping that up to date can be very important. That's a lot of times if alumni will look and see that your website's a little bit dry, they tend to think you're dead. So something I did is I threw our Twitter on top of our website. So if I take a picture, it'll go automatically up there. And if you search W0EEE, when you go to our website, you'll see some more of our recent activity.
Well, we at Yale, we're a club that's in reorganization. We have been for about 20 years now. But what was it? We're using the original social media, which is ham radio. And we have a net, a VHF net or UHF net that meets weekly and brings in alumni over Echolink and other academic. And you're all welcome to join us also Tuesday nights at 8 o'clock Eastern. And that's very effective, as it turns out. We shouldn't underrate that. Particularly for getting active hams in, also making connections in the community, which is very important for us because we need all kinds of support from different kinds of people, not only students, not only staff or faculty, but also knowledgeable people in the community.
Yeah, totally.
Yeah, I'll piggyback off that a bit. For a while, we had a simplex net actually in our area, and we got a lot of community members actually joining in on that. So it was good in that regard too. And we had people around campus doing it. But
So another question, sort of in that same vein: do all the clubs in the room have a QRZ page? Is that no? So something you might want to think about is getting a QRZ page up there. Once you get, if you don't already have, but once you already get your club call sign. Because I have worked with people who didn't realize I was a school. They just thought, they just heard the pile up and was like, why does everyone want to talk? Clearly something special is happening. And then soon discovered that we were a school, and I've had alumni stumble into that maybe weren't hams when they were at the university, but suddenly they see the QRZ page. And yeah, using the original social network, the way you phrase it there, is a great way to get it out there. What about videos and YouTube? So everyone knows that this has been live streamed and Facebook Live, and it's being recorded right now as well. Like, we are live streamed, right, Tony? Okay. And we have potentially people asking questions on Reddit or Facebook Live or YouTube or whatever, or not. If you're out there, feel free to ask a question. How are you taking advantage of videos and that sort of interactive media within your clubs, or is anyone doing that? So no one? Oh no, we got one.
I was actually going to make a point to the previous one that I think is really important, is people who are applying for college need to know, they need to be able to find out that there's a radio club at that college. Because you do get some high school people who go to college and then might not stay involved in ham radio, but you get other ones like me who see this college ham radio club as a way to take it to the next level. And those can be some of your best members if they stay with it, because they often are seasoned hams already. Well, I didn't even know that Clarkson had a ham radio club until a buddy from high school took me up there and said, oh, they've got a booth over here. Cool, I didn't know that. And so I think you need to make sure that you can figure out easily that there's a radio club at that college. And the things that we mentioned are ways to do that.
I think identification is a big problem. We presume a lot of us are big schools, and there are a lot of freshmen coming in every year. We don't know who the hams are. There's no way, and we don't have an interface with the admissions department or with the alumni department, so we can't identify alumni who were or are hams. And if anyone has an idea how to do that better, I'd like to know.
Alumni newsletter worked for us a couple of times, so it's really hard to get in the alumni newsletter because it's primarily spent trying to raise funds. But we did a couple special events where alumni and students were working together, and that kind of hit the sweet spot of the story they were trying to tell. And so that actually netted us a few more alums that didn't realize that we're still active.
Excellent. So I do want to keep us moving because we only have about 20 minutes left, and we're on slide 6 of 10. So in the interest of keeping things going, so smartphones. This is something, we all have radios in our pocket. The general populace is sort of realizing that right now, that this is a radio, or actually several radios. Are clubs using each other's smartphones in any way? So there's apps like QRZ, there's an app for that. There's an app, one of the gentlemen came by the booth yesterday and had a great sort of DX spotting app for your phones if you're working like soda or something and you want to pull it up. One of the more interesting things that's cool is, how many people know what APRS is? Everyone knows there's an app for APRS, or you can just go to the website, pick one of them. It's a great way to do projects and share them with people, and you can tell them to follow it on their smartphones. So this is something my brother and I have done a whole bunch, and when I landed here on Thursday, he was going to pick me up at the airport, and he just gave me a call saying, yeah, I have my Kenwood Digipede in my position every so often. Follow me on APRS, I'll be there in about an hour. And I just sat down and pulled it up on my phone and said, oh, okay, he's in Columbus, and he'll be here pretty soon, and I could follow him along the way. So I think that that's something that we can really take advantage of, because again, getting that interest and showing to people that it's not your grandpa's hobby and it's relatable, that's a very, very easy way. And you can get APRS IS uploading from your phone. You don't even have to use a ham band, but it's really something there that you can play with. The next one I want to get to is somewhat related to amateur radio in the direct sense, but also something that I think has a lot of crossover, A lot of people don't realize that. Everyone knows what making is or what a maker is? No? Yes? No? Okay, so there's a lot of no's in the room and some yeses. So for those of you who don't know, sort of the biggest event in the making community is also going on right now in San Francisco called Maker Faire. It's Bay Area Maker Faire, the OG Maker Faire. Making is this idea, it's a sort of DIY movement. It's creating something, it's mixing art and engineering and science and math and just all sorts of really cool creative ways. It could be everything from building a ridiculous sculpture to launching a hot air balloon to, doing a fox hunt and building your own antennas for it. And if you follow some of the popular making websites like hackaday.com, recently their content has ticked up to about 20% or so as amateur radio projects that people have done. And this is going mainstream in the making community. And one thing that we have at UF and some other schools, I know Rose-Hulman has one as well, is there's making clubs. And they have 3D printers and maker spaces and all that where you can do this. There are students there that are either interested in amateur radio, maybe licensed in amateur radio, but don't know that you have a club. It's a great avenue to get that exposure out there and to share that. So I just want to see, is there any clubs that have already established that crossover?
Yeah, we have one at Yale. We've given a couple of courses, classes, build your own receiver kind of class with soldering and all that. They like that.
So it's something to think about. If you don't know what making is, you can go online, Google it. There's a whole magazine called Make that you can get every month or every 2 months, and you can get on that sort of bandwagon. But there's some really cool, like high altitude ballooning is really popular in the maker world. 3D printing is obviously really cool. And there's 3D printing projects for making antennas, and stuff like that. You supply the wire and you 3D print the rest of the structure and you feed the wire through and you make, like an egg beater antenna or something like that. So there's some really cool projects out there, and it could be a really great way that you could grow your clubs and get people interested. So I wanted to bring that up because I think sort of, if you read QST a couple months ago, Tom quoted me in that saying, the next generation of hams is going to be this maker movement. And I think that that's really true for college hams as well. If we want to bring people in, if we want to grow this hobby, I think we need to show people that, no, it is completely relevant. There's this whole other movement that's doing it already. Let's bring them in and get them in on the fun as well. And you might get some people that aren't engineers, that aren't scientists, joining. You're going to get the artists joining. You're going to get, really different majors, which is, I think, absolutely critical to having a successful club. So I want to bring up a couple of technical questions that came up, and something that has come up a little bit already, but one of the things that people asked when we did the survey was about working Oscars and really trying to work other clubs and stuff on Oscars. How many club stations have a satellite setup? So really few. So Aero Antenna is here. It's $150 and you can go buy a portable Yagi. And now your club station has a satellite setup and you can do it with any HT. It's really easy. If you go over to AMSAT's booth, and they were just in here I think right before us, there is a laundry list of satellites that you can work, just FM even, and make those contacts. And it's not hard at all. It's setting PL tones and learning to point an antenna at some place in the sky. And yes, there's an app for that as well. So you can sit there with your cell phone and an HT and point the antenna, and the app, at least on the iPhone, even has like the angle measurements on it. So you hold it in the same hand that you're holding the antenna with, and it will tell you if you're pointing it in the right direction or not. And you can work satellites. So I think one of the things that we talked about was activities. And I think that's something that maybe we should start discussing on the Facebook group, is starting a satellite night for colleges and just working some passes. Since it is a very, very accessible hobby, you don't have to be in a club shack to do it. You can do it with no facilities. You don't have to climb a tower. You can have all that. Like, satellite ground stations are beautiful and nice, but you can also do it with a lot less. You can also downlink slow scan TV from the International Space Station when it passes over, which is really kind of cool. And digipede up to it on APRS. So there's a lot of stuff that you can do on satellites that is not difficult to do. And I would say if you're interested in doing it, just in the interest of time here, hop on the Facebook group, which is sort of where everything's happening, and just bring it up and say, hey, my club wants to do satellite tracking. So the next one is software-defined radios. And I want to spend a little bit of time on this one. How many clubs have an SDR? And I mean any SDR. It doesn't have to be a Flex. Okay, so they're about $12. You can go to Amazon and get an SDR that will do receive. How many people have gotten one of those RTL SDRs, the $12 ones? So another maker crossover here. How many people are actually using them in projects? Okay, what sort of projects, if anyone wants to share them, like in your club stations? What are you doing?
ADSB receivers.
So what is ADSB for everyone else?
So ADSB is a technology where aircraft are GPS equipped to transmit their positions. So you can set up a receiver with this thing because it's just an envelope detector, so it's really simple, and make displays of air traffic.
Anyone else?
Public safety DVR, so all scanners, all the traffic can be captured all at once and play back in files so you don't miss anything.
Has anyone ever thought about using it for spotting, for amateur radio? Like having one rig is great. If you have the second antenna, you know, you can put your little cheap TV tuner on that. One of the things we talked about at Hamvention that I thought was a great idea was, you know, getting that word out about our clubs, right? What if we had one of those cheap TV tuners, as I think, was it Sterling that made the comment about them being great lightning arresters? You know, just leave it hooked up to your antenna. Who cares if it destroys that in a Raspberry Pi? And, you know, let it just live on your website show, you know, a waterfall and let people see band conditions. Or, you know, transmit, or not transmit, but I mean just receive, you know, HF. You could do Whisper, downloading that through just a little RTL SDR.
So I have a point about this in general, which is when you're trying to run a college ham radio club, you want the college ham radio club to look like something modern and high tech, not some bunch of guys who have some affinity for 30-year-old radios that are collecting dust. You want this to seem modern and high tech. So this thing and a whole bunch of other things we talked about are a great way to do that. And so, for instance, at Clarkson, when we replaced the IC761 with a Flex, you know, not everybody is going to be able to do this. That, I think, is why the club is still here. Like, whoa, this is high tech. So that appearance is just really important in general for bringing people in, for keeping them in, for showing the club off to faculty and staff, and for showing it off as a breeding ground for people who are going to get into modern industry. This stuff matters.
Any other thoughts on software-defined radios? How many people are using them for contesting that have them at their college clubs? So if you haven't used a Flex for contesting, you have not lived.
That's true.
Like, that's one of our big draws, actually. So we have a number of HF stations at UF set up. We have several antennas on the roof. And we don't let the techs or sort of the new generals on the Flex because it's a lot of radio to handle, and there's a lot of buttons and a lot of settings, and you can easily get overwhelmed. But it's something that they see the pretty, you know, box and the soothing blue light, and they want to go for it. And, you know, it gives them something to work, and they will master a whole bunch of stuff in that process to sort of work towards getting comfortable on the Flex. You know, they'll learn their different modes and all that, and they'll want to shadow you, and it actually draws attention, you know, because it looks high tech, it looks really modern to that point. And in terms of contesting all that, I will have students that want to come up there and they'll sit there and they'll work. We have also a 10 Tech Orion, which also has a lot of radio for a new ham. But, you know, we put them on the Orion and it's all knobs, and they're a little more comfortable with that. And they'll be on it for a couple of days during a contest, and by the end of it, they want to try the Flex out, and they feel very comfortable going to that because they've had that experience, and that has something to aspire to. So that might be something that clubs want to think about. You know, as your equipment can also draw up membership in and of itself, and you don't have to have the newest Flex. The Flex 3000 is perfectly fine. It'll do 100 watts, and it, you know, would be great for, you know, students wanting together. It's the same software interface. So. I do want to bring a couple of activities as well. And then we're going to open up for any other questions here. So Field Day is in June. We should hear every college station on the air. Even if it's just you operating for an hour from the club station for fun. We need to have every school club on the air. This is a really big moment for, you know, collegiate amateur radio, and we can really make a statement by having these club stations on the air. If you can do a go-to station, if you can partner with a local club, all the better. But I think we should all strive to make sure that every, you know, college station is in a log that is submitted to the league for Field Day. And I think that that's a goal that, you know, we in this room can take back to our universities, but we can also share that on social media and really encourage it. Because it's something really simple and it can inspire a lot of activity. The other, yeah.
We build that into the Michigan CUSO party with a contest, like a sub-contest with the University of Michigan, which includes a trophy that goes back and forth between the school that wins. And I have to point out that Michigan State is helping the last year.
And Kansas CUSO party does something similar. They actually have a school class where the 6 universities in Kansas that have clubs actually fight back. They just got their children back this year. Yeah. So lots of CUSO parties are good opportunities. And if they're not supporting school class right now, you should reach out to them because I'm sure they would love to have more participation in the CUSO party.
And of course, the other one is 2 times a year we get to be on the receiving end of a pileup. I mean, usually we are most of the time because school clubs are kind of rare, but school club roundup. If your club doesn't do this already, going back to the videos, I have videos on my YouTube page from us working school club roundup with new hams that we were just getting on the air, put them in the seat, and I'd be the control op for them, and they might be a tech, and they're getting on the HF bands for the first time, and they have a whole bunch of people that want to talk to them. And it's a really, really cool experience because people want to talk to school clubs during that event. So if your club doesn't do it, again, this is one where you can work all 25 hours or something over the course of the week, or you can work one, it doesn't matter, but show that presence, submit a log, because it can really rejuvenate. If you're an alumni of a club, write to that school and say it's an hour of your time. You can do it on VHF just locally in town. That's a lot of fun even. We did it one night. We had a pileup on VHF, which I've never had before in my life, like 2 meters simplex, and there's a pileup. Okay, took me half an hour to work through it. That was really cool with an HT that got really hot because they don't design to work like that. But it was really, really cool. So something to sort of put on the radar. And one of the things I'd really like to see everyone do from this group is get onto that Facebook page. I'm going to call it CARI, as my brother keeps getting on me about using the acronym. I like to use the acronym CARI versus CARI because the C pronounces the C's clear when you say CARI. But get on the Facebook page and share all these activities and share when your club's going to be on the air and all that, because that activity will draw other clubs into the mix. If you're in Kansas, for example, the CUSO party, has some, and there's another school that isn't part of it, it's an easy way to pull them in and help grow the amateur radio. The one other thing that we want to do here is have photos or links to photos. We want to get them up on the Facebook page. And I'd love to have them because I want to write about it and get it in QST and hopefully all over the place. So feel free to take a photo. It's my email address. I have cards as well, Andy@gatorradio.org. Gatorradio.org is our club website, so we do that for all the officers. We give them an email address at the, sort of makes it a little more official and presentable. Something else you might want to think about. But send me photos, send me links to photos if they're on Flickr, if they're on Facebook or whatever, because I want to get all this data and start putting it into something that we can present and say, no, this is a really big deal, and we should continue to support it. So are there any other questions out there? I know Sam had an idea that we had talked about off and on a bit. I don't know if you want to bring that up now in the last 3 or 4 minutes.
Andy, whatever you're saying.
Yeah, so really quick.
One of the things we talked about, I'll define it as continuity. When you guys graduate, who's your replacement? Have you made any effort that the faculty advisors have somewhat more continuity? Have you tried to get them organized? Ought to find a way for them to, be in contact.
So at UF, the nice thing that we have the nonprofit that is obviously a lot more stable because you have a board of a nonprofit that's elected at a regular time and all that. So that's one way that I found that it works really, really well. Because if you do go through, we're going through a low amount of students right now at UF. There's 3 students that are going to be left after I leave in August, yeah. But we have this board of people of, faculty, of alumni, trustees.
That's one school. I want them all hooked up.
So that would definitely be something that I would encourage others to think about doing, is establishing that board.
Well, running a nonprofit is a big deal.
Right, but it doesn't have to be a full nonprofit. It could be an elected board and be part of the club, sort of advisors or alumni. That's a good point. Thank you. In the last 2 minutes.